Have you ever wondered what it's like to be on the precipice of war, to know that an invasion is imminent? Well, one group of Americans did experience this. This would be the citizens of the Confederate States of America in the 8 months leading up to the Civil War and after the election of President Lincoln. But a couple of northern newspapers early on, after about 3 or 4 months in the spring of 1861, noticed that there really is no movement, that these slaves are quite frankly quite happy in their situation and don't understand what their opportunity would be if the system changed. Another thing I noticed is prior to the war, I'd say about 3 to 5 years, you start to see speeches by Southerners saying they see a war coming, that there's no way these abolitionists are going to let up. And they point to the abolitionists as an organization, a propaganda organization designed to just wither away at the South and its slave apprenticeship system. The North was looking to figure out a port that would still buy cotton produced in the Confederacy. And so one of the early problems was, how do we force these plantation owners to prohibit these plantation owners from doing business with the North? Then there are articles recommending the different types of rifles to stock up on. One article recommending a double-barreled shotgun from a certain company. They had a lot of their own food, but so much of the land was devoted to cotton that they were going to have to basically ask the cotton farmers, or certainly the smaller ones, to produce food instead in preparation for the war. That was not going to be easy, as cotton was very profitable. This idea that we've been taught, that all of the dark-skinned slaves and servants were just picking cotton and tomatoes and they weren't doing anything smart, is completely incorrect. They were the mechanics. And remember, mechanics was their word for today's engineers. As you get closer to the war, say 1858-59, the abolitionist writing becomes more and more violent and rabid, just describing the South as this horrible slave society. And you see in the South writers saying, hey, why are you stirring up so much hatred against us? These abolitionists, all of the writers, the chief writers, come from very wealthy, very elite families. And you see reference to that in the South. They talk about these New Englanders who want to make everybody abide by their Puritan ways, or they reference the fact that these Negro slaves we have were brought here by their fathers. They were the slave traders. The smarter intellectual people whose speeches I read reference how important this propaganda was, and that it was working, and that you could see a time coming when there was going to be a war and that the North would invade. Strategic writers, they would point out what the South could do, which it could secede, and then it could form a union that would have consisted of California, the southwestern states, and Mexico. And there's even this other strategy about what they called the Golden Circle, which is basically a whole union around the Gulf of Mexico, so down through Central America. So I believe that this was known by the North, that they knew that there were bankers back in Europe who would love to see the United States separated, love to be the bankers of choice of this new slave economy that would be gigantic. And I believe that when the South seceded, the North realized that if they don't put this back together, that they will become diminished. They will become the smaller player, and their power was at great risk. I believe that's why they invaded the South, and that's why they were willing to do what they did in order to not just subdue or eliminate slavery. They did way more than that, but to destroy the economy and subdue it under what we call Reconstruction for the next 20 years afterwards. A lot of this, and wanted to get some of these ideas out there. I think most of them are accurate in terms of the facts, but I'd love to hear if people have heard other things that contradict. I mean, certainly when it comes to slavery, you hear so many contradicting stories. And my main thing with slavery is we're always made to think that 99% of the slaves were getting beat. And really, that was 1%. Again, they invert the story. The winners that write the history, it's typically inverted. It's just another way to look at these books when you're reading through them. Thank you. Have a good one.